Okay then, I've just shared my screen. Please let me know once you can see the screen. Alright, perfect. So we will start with the next thing. In the last call we discussed about the transformation. Today we're gonna discuss about the metrics. So we'll go to our folder. Alright, I'm just gonna open a notepad over here. Okay, there are the metrics as we just a minute. Okay, the metrics we already know, right? A metric is an object which performs the aggregation on a fact, and whatever the aggregations you want to apply, there could be sum, average, mean, max, whatever the aggregations you want to apply on top of the fact, you have to create a metric. And metric is something that you can place in the report to see the data. There are four types of metric that are available in MicroStrategy. One is the simple metric. Second, we have something as nested metric. Third, something is called as compound metric, and the fourth and the last one is the derived metric. Let's start one by one. First, we're going to discuss about the simple metric. A simple metric is a metric that we already saw last day. It's just as the simple aggregation on a fact. When you define a metric, you can define the transformations, you can define the conditions, you can define the levels. So whatever the components that makes up the metric, you can define any of those things. And when you create such kind of a metric, those are called as simple metric. I'm just going to open the one which we created last day. So this is the simple metric that we had created, which does sum of revenue. So you can see under the formula, it does the sum of revenue. Whenever you create a metric, there are four components which you can define. One is the formula, which is the compulsory that you have to define it. Along with that, you have something called as level. We're going to discuss this in next few minutes, but yeah, this is also one of the components that you can add to the metric definition. Level is something which specifies the level at which you want to calculate your metric. By default, it's the report level, which means that whatever attribute you use in the report, at that particular level, your metric will be calculated. We're going to discuss this on what exactly the level does. Third thing is the condition. If in case you want your metric to consider a specific filters, you can add a condition over here. Fourth and the last thing is the transformation. That is something that we have already seen last day. So if in case you want to create any kind of a transformational matrix, you need to create a transformation. And once that transformation has been created, you can use under the metric definition. So the simple metrics we have already created last day, which does the sum of whatever the aggregations of fact. And along with that, you can just play around with the other components. The next type of a metric that we have is the nested metric. But before we go ahead and create the nested metric, there is something that we have to discuss is levels. So far, if I go back to the revenue metric, so far this metric is getting calculated at the report level, which means that if I place any attributes in the report at that particular level, my metric will be evaluated. Now let's say I want one more metric which always calculates at the year level. Irrespective of any other attribute I use in the report, this particular metric should show me the data based on the years only. So based on the year, my value will be calculated, my metric value will be calculated and display in the output. So whenever you have to define a level matrix, remove the report level, and I'm going to add the attributes, that is the level at which I want to define it. So I want that this metric to be calculated at the year level. So I've dragged and dropped the attribute under the level section, and it means that this metric will be calculated at the year level. Whenever you add any kind of a level, along with that you have something as filtering and the grouping options. So as of now, I'm going to go with the standard filtering, standard grouping. There are few more options available under the filtering, like absolute, ignore. Under grouping, I have something as beginning, ending. This is all that we're going to cover when we start with the advanced topic. For today, for now, we're just going to discuss about the filtering and grouping with the standard option. The rest all options we will definitely cover but that we will do it in the advanced topic. So over here, I'm trying to create a metric revenue, and under the level, I have placed the year attribute. That means we are trying to calculate a metric at a year level. Let me save this metric. I'm going to say save as. I'm going to say revenue. This to be calculated at the year level. That's it. So we have two metrics, one which calculates at the report level, the other metric which calculates at the year level. Let's go ahead and create one sample report. I'm going to place the year attribute. I'm going to place the month attribute, and we will place both the metrics that we have created. One which calculates at the report level, that is the revenue metric, and I have revenue year which calculates at the year level. Now when I run this report, you can see that the values have been displayed. Let's first try to analyze the revenue metric. The revenue metric has been getting calculated at the report level. So for a particular year, for a particular month, my revenue value is getting calculated. So for 2010 January, the value is $502,000. For 2010 February, my value is $610,000. So basically, this has been calculated at the report level. So for a year, for a month, my value has been calculated. If we look at the new metric, which is only calculating at the year level. So it is calculating the value for the entire year 2010. So for entire year 2010, my revenue value is 8.6 million, and that is what is displayed across the entire year. Though I have placed the month attribute in the report, it is not considering that, but it is just showing me one value wherever the year is 2010. If you look at the below example, even for 2011, it is just displaying one value. If I show you the sequel over here for the new metric, you can clearly see that my metric is only been calculated at the year level. So it says select year, sum of revenue, and that's it. And when we say that I want a metric to be calculated at a specific level, we define under the metric definition. And because we have calculated at the year level, it is just showing me one value. Even if I replace this with some other attribute, let's say I don't want to display the month, instead I add, let's say, country. Okay, and when I need a year. Okay, so I will place a year over here. Now when I run this, my same metric, the initial metric, the revenue metric, still shows me the split based on the countries. So for 2010 USA, this is the value. For 2010 web, this is the value. But if you look at the new metric, that is which is calculated at the year level, it still shows me 8.6 million, which means that again, this metric has been calculated at the year level. It comes up with a one total for entire year 2010, and same thing has been displayed over here. So even for 2011, it has been evaluated to 11.5 million, and that is what it's been displayed. So at whatever level you want your metric to be calculated, you just have to modify the metric, go to the level, and you can add the corresponding attributes over there. Good until here? Perfect. Let me just save this report. I'm going to say as metrics. All right. So now let's come back to the second type of a metric, which are nested metrics. A nested metrics are the metrics where you perform an aggregation within the another aggregation. So far, let's say I have created a sum of revenue, and I want this metric to be calculated at a month level. Okay, this is a normal simple metric which I'm doing, sum of revenue, and this to be calculated at the month level. A nested metrics are the metrics where you perform an aggregation within the another aggregation. So on top of this, I need to perform an average. Let's say I wanted to perform an average for this entire calculation, and along with this, I need that this to be calculated at a year level. So you can clearly see the first evaluation is this, which will do sum of revenue at a month level, and on top of that it is doing an average which is at a year level. I have an aggregation within the another aggregation, and such kind of a metrics are called as nested metric. It's a very simple thing. The nested metrics are the one where you perform an aggregation within the another aggregation. We will take this same example and we will try to create a metric out of it. So we come to back to MicroStrategy. I'm going to say create new metric. I'm going to say this as sum of revenue. Okay, I want the sum of revenue to be done at a month level. So I'm going to remove the report level. I'm going to add a month attribute over here. So you can see that it is showing sum of revenue calculated at the month level. On top of this, I need to perform one more aggregation, that is average, which has to be done at the year level. So what we're gonna do over here, I'm gonna say average for this entire thing. I'm gonna validate this, and I want that for an average, my level has to be year. So I'm gonna remove the report level. I'm going to add a year attribute. So you can see over here it's a nested, right? First it does a sum of revenue which is calculated at the month level, and on top of that it is doing an average which is at the year level. So aggregation within the another aggregation. Let me save this metric. I'm going to save this as revenue nested. We'll go back to our sample report. I'm going to add a month attribute. I'm going to place the nested metric as well. And now when I run this report, let me just change the formatting. Okay. So now if you look over here, it gives me some value. Now let's try to understand how this value has been calculated. So I'll just open a calc over here. Okay. So now if you look over here, the first metric is a normal revenue metric which gives me the data based on a year and month. So for 2010 January, this is the value. For 2010 Feb, this is the value, and so on. So this is at the report level. Second, we understand the value has been calculated at the year level. So for an entire year 2010, value is around 8.6 millions. The third metric that we have created, that's a nested metric. First, it will do a summation for at a month level, and on top of that, it has to do an average at year level. So if I consider over here Jan 2000 till December 2010, from Jan 2010 till December 2010, my summation is around 8.6 million. Okay, so if we consider only for 2010, the summation of all the months is 8647238. So first it does summation of all the revenue at a month level, whereas if I go to a year, it has to do an average. So divide by 12 and value comes up to 72603, and that is exactly what has been displayed by the metric. So first it does a summation at a month level. Within a year I have 12 months, so it's going to divide by 12 to get the average, and that is what exactly it's been displayed. So first it does the inner aggregation, that is sum of revenue at a month level, and on top of that it's going to do the average at a year level. Even if you consider for 2011, the summation for all the months of 2011 is 11,517,606 divided by 12. That comes up to 959,801, and same has been displayed under the metric. So this is how the nested metrics are been calculated. Nested metrics, simple, two aggregations or just an aggregation within the another aggregation. Is this clear? Any
Hey,
question?
Panish.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So the sum of revenue by year also gave the same amount, 8647283, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But right now you said the sum of year by month also is giving the same value?
Sum of year by month.
Sum of revenue by month.
We are not doing sum of the inner one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, the sum of revenue by month, but the outer aggregation is for the year, right? So what we are doing over here, it does the sum of revenue at a month level, okay?
Okay.
But the final aggregation is at a year. So it says, okay, my final average value needs to be by year. So within a year, I have 12 months. So first it's going to do the sum of all those revenues by month. And on top of that, it's going to do an average. So what it does is this entire thing, all these values are going to be accumulated, are going to get aggregated from January 2010 January 2010 till December 2010, which is 8647238. And on top of that, it has to do an average. So it's going to divide by 12 and the value comes up to 720,603.
Yeah. If we create a metric now just for sum of revenue by month, what will the value be there?
That's going to be the same as this one. If you want, I can show you that. So let me do the revenue. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to add time. I'll say month. It's going to be same as the revenue metric. I'm going to show that. It's going to be a month. Sorry.
So that's what I'm wondering. How come sum of revenue by month and sum of revenue by year are the same? So,
See, that's what I'm saying. It's not the same. You're just doing a simple aggregation of considering only this. There are two aggregation, two different levels. At the end, I have to calculate at the year level. And that's the reason it is only considering at the month. That's the reason it's only considering by year. If the outer
hmm,
aggregation was not there, that would have performed differently. And that is what I'm going to show you now. So if I do
okay.
revenue by month, and I'm going to place that in the report. Okay. When I place this report, it's going to show me different value that is equivalent to the normal revenue because every months are
Okay.
different. So it's going to give me this because of my final aggregation is at a year level. See, initially you can consider this thing only. Revenue by month is
Mhm.
doing this same things. But if I want to calculate an average at a year level, so of course I had to do a summation of all this divided by 12, and that's the reason it
Mhm.
is giving me 72603.
Yeah.
Make sense now?
Okay.
Okay. Uh,
So what if you had done directly average?
that will do the number of
Uh,
years. That will do by divided by number of years. If I do directly as an
uh,
average of a metric,
mhm.
average of a revenue at a year level, so it will do summation of all this thing divided by number of years. That will give me the average at a year level.
Oh,
Is this clear
okay.
now? Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is all about the nested metric. So we saw simple metrics, we saw a level within the metrics, and we also saw something called as nested metrics. The and third type of a metric, which is the simplest type of a metric that we have, is the compound metric. A compound metrics are the metrics which uses the existing metrics to perform some arithmetic operation. That's it. Let's say I have one existing metric called metric 1. And if I divide it by 1000, this is a compound metric. So I do not define any kind of a formula. I do not define any kind of an aggregation over here. I just use the existing ones, perform some arithmetic operation. Those all are compound metrics. So even if I do metric 1 divided by metric 2, compound metric. If I do metric 1 plus metric 2, the entire thing, this entire, sorry, this entire thing, if I just multiply by metric 3, again this is a compound metric. So whatever arithmetic operation you want to perform, but yes, it has to be based on the existing metrics. Simple. So let's try to create few compound metrics in our project and we'll see how exactly it works. So I'm going to say create new metric, and let's say I'll go to the folder where metrics have been saved, and I will simply say revenue divided by 1000. If I validate, it's a valid expression. Now if you look very closely over here, my main metric is revenue divided by 1000. When you define a compound metric, you will not see any other components. You're not going to see something called as formulae. You're not going to see something called as condition, transformations. No, it is only the one which are displayed over here is for the revenue metric. It's not for the new one that we are creating it. It's only for the revenue metric which have been displayed. Okay, these are the options that have been displayed for the transformations or something. So you cannot add anything over here because this is just for the display purpose. That is, okay, we have used the revenue metric and these are the components which are available under the which we have selected under the revenue metric. But for the compound metric, when I do revenue divided by 1000, I do not have any other options where I can say, okay, this is the transformations to be applied, these are the labels to be applied. No, not possible. If you want if you want it to get reflected in your compound metric, you have to go ahead and modify the standalone metrics for that. So if in case you want this compound metric to be calculated at the year level, I have to modify this standalone metric to be calculated at the year level so that it gets reflected in my compound metric. I'll take one more example and that will definitely clear all your doubts. I'm going to rename this metric as revenue divided by 1000, and let me create one more compound metric over here. Where I'm going to say revenue divided by revenue at year level, and I want this to be calculated as a percentage. Now we'll say okay. So now if you look over here in this compound metric, we are using two metrics, two standalone metrics, revenue metric and revenue year. So whatever the formula level that you see, those are for the standalone metric. So under revenue, these are the options that we have set up. Under the revenue year, these are the options that we have set up. But if I just close all this thing, I do not see any options for the when I define a compound metric. So you will not see anything called as formulae, neither level, condition, transformations. No, it's only for the standalone metrics. So whenever you define a compound metric, you just have to make sure if in case you need a specific level to be calculated for, you have to adjust in the individual metrics. So when you adjust under the individual metrics, automatically it's going to get reflected under the compound metric. Okay, and over here we are defining revenue divided by revenue year. I'm going to save this. I will say revenue by revenue year, and I'm going to save this metric. Let's go back to our sample report. I'm going to modify this, and we're just going to place the new metric that we have created. One we have created is revenue divided by 1000, another is revenue divided by revenue year. Now when I run this report, it will show me some data. The first thing is revenue divided by 1000. So revenue is 502,224. If I divide by 1000, that comes up to 502. If I do 610,056 divided by 1000, that comes up to 610, and this confirms that my metric, my compound metric, is working perfectly fine. Second we have created is revenue divided by revenue year. So let's take as a first example, first row. Revenue value is 502,224 divided by revenue at a year level, which is 8647238, I'm going to display this as percentage, so into 100, and that comes up to 5.8. So round figure, it's 6%. Take second row, value is 610056. That is the revenue value divided by revenue at a year, 8647238. And this I'm going to multiply by 100, which comes up to 7%, and exactly the same value has been displayed in the out. So we just use the existing metrics. On top of that, we perform some arithmetic operation, and those metrics are called as compound metrics. Is this clear? Any question with respect to compound metrics? No? All right. The fourth and the last type of a metric that we have in MicroStrategy are the derived metrics. When I say derived metrics, the one thing that you observe over here, whatever the metrics that we have discussed, each and every metric we created at a project level. So all these metrics we created under a MicroStrategy project, which means that I can use the same metrics in n number of reports. So these are all reusable objects, right? I have created this at a project level. So even if tomorrow I create any new report, I can use those metrics over there as well. Derived metrics are the metrics which are local to the report, which you create at a report level, and those are not reusable. You cannot use those derived metrics into some another reports. Not possible. So the metrics which you define at a report level are only local to that particular report, and it cannot be shared across multiple reports. Let's come back to our report. This is our report, and at the report level I want to create one more metric. Let's say I want to do revenue, let's say revenue minus revenue nested. Any example, you take any example. I want to define this data, or let's say I'll take one more simple example. Let's say I want to do a max of revenue at individual year. I want to just display one metric which will give me the max of a revenue for the entire year 2010, for 2011 and 2012. It is possible. So what I'm going to do is, whenever you want to create a metric at a report level, I do not want to create as a standalone object. I'll just click on insert, and there is an option which says new metric. I'm going to click on new metric, and I can define a new metric over here. Let's say I want to define as max of revenue. If I look again one thing over here, I can use only those objects which are present in my report. So I can create a derive metric only based on the objects that I have in my report. So I have 2 attributes and around like 5 metrics. Only based on those objects I can define my derive metric. And when if I click over here, I do not see anything called as public objects or schema objects. Not possible. Derive metrics can be created only based on the objects that we use in the report. So if I want to do a max of revenue, I'm going to say max. I'm going to drag and drop the revenue metric over here. So this will do max of revenue, and I want this to be calculated based on year level. So I'm going to drag and drop here over here. That's it. So if you look over here, we are doing max of revenue, and that has to be calculated at the year level. Derived metrics are the metrics which are calculated at the last. Once my data has been generated, once my report data has been generated, only after that my derived metric will be calculated. Derived metric does not require any kind of a SQL. Entire derived metric calculation will be handled by analytical engine. When I say analytical engine, that means it's an OLAP feature. So once I say OK over here, I can clearly see the max of revenue for 2010 is 1.008 million. If you compare all the values of 2010, I can clearly see 1.008 million is the highest value, and same thing has been displayed over here. If I consider 2011, these are all values of year 2011, and I can clearly see 1.096 million is the highest value, and same thing has been displayed over here. If I go and show you the sequel of this report, there will be no change in the sequel. My metric will be calculated by the analytical engine. You can see analytical engine calculation steps over here. My derive metric is getting calculated. Even if I show you the entire report sequence, you will not see any calculation which does the max of revenue at a year level. Not possible. Derive metric is something which is handled by the analytical engine and it does not impact the report sequence. Even if I create any new derive metric, let's say insert new metric, and this time let's say if I do I'm just doing some random, okay, revenue minus revenue nested. Okay, I'm gonna give some name. Okay, revenue minus revenue nested. I'm gonna say okay. If I run this report, if this is the one, the revenue value is 502224 minus 720603. So if I do a calculation over here, 502224 minus 720603, value comes up to minus 218379, and you can clearly see it's minus 218379. So even this is working perfectly fine. If I go and show you under the sequel, and you can again see that both the metrics have been calculated by the analytical engine. So the derive metrics are something which does not require any kind of an extra sequel. It will be done on the fly. Once my report data is been fetched, once my report data has been generated, Microstrategy analytical engine will calculate the derive metric for me. Is this clear? Any question over here? No? Okay, so I'm just going to quickly recap what are the things that we discussed about the metrics. There are 4 types of metrics that we have in MicroStrategy: simple, simple metric, nested metric, compound metric, and the derive metric. Simple metric, we just do a simple aggregation of a metric. Whenever you define a metric, you can define any other components as well, like filters, levels, or transformations. Second is something we saw, a level within a metric. If you want your metric to be calculated at a specific level, you just need to make sure you go to the metric definition, and under that you have an option where you can specify, okay, these are the attribute for which I want to define my levels for a metric, and accordingly my metric will be evaluated at that particular levels. Then we saw a nested matrix where we perform an aggregation within the another aggregation. So it's kind of a container where you perform the inner aggregation will be performed first, and on top of that it's going to perform the other aggregation. We took a simple example where we first did a summation for all the months, and on top of that we did an average which was calculated at the year level. Third we saw was the compound metric. Compound are the one where you use the existing metrics, you perform some arithmetic operation, and based on that my metric value will be calculated. The fourth and the last type of a metric that we saw are the derived metrics. Derived metrics are the one which you don't define at a project level, but instead you define at a report level. These are the one which does not impact the report sequence. They have been calculated after the report data is been generated, and they are handled by the analytical engine. Okay, so this is all that we have from the metrics in MicroStrategy, and this is also that we all have for today. It's going to be a bit short session, but yes, I want to take this as a topic by topic. So we'll just stop over here for today. Tomorrow we're going to meet up at same time, and tomorrow I'm going to discuss about the filters. We will see what are the filters, what the filters does in MicroStrategy, and we will see how does that impacts my report data. Okay, so for today we'll just stop over here. Let's meet tomorrow at same time and we'll continue with the other topics.
Hey Panish.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going through the videos
Mm-hmm.
and the theory classes of logical and physical. So is this just a concept you're explaining, or is that what we implement in MicroStrategy at some time?
No, this is just the concept that we have discussed. So how when you start
Ah,
working on a project, right, you need to understand the models before you actually can start creating your objects. So if you remember when we were discussing on the models, we need to identify, okay, these are the ones which has to be created as an attributes. From the logical model, we understand, okay, these are the attributes that we have to create. These are the facts that we have to create. But from the physical model, I understand this as an attribute has to point which all tables and the columns. This as a
mm,
fact has to point to which tables and the columns. When we discuss about the hierarchies in the model, we understand, okay, we need to define the attributes under which we need to give some kind of a relationship, that is the parent-child relationship, so that we get a correct system hierarchy.
okay, so this is more of like modeling concept.
Exactly. So this is something to make you aware, to make you understand how you can start working on a data warehousing project.
Right.
And also,
So as a
mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
And as
Go
in
ahead.
from the model, I was trying to more focus on the microstrategy part. When we identify the attribute, what are the components which makes the attribute? Okay, it's the attribute forms, it's the attribute element. What are the types of columns we can have? ID columns, description columns, fact columns. What kind of a relationship we can have? Okay, it's one to many, many. Because if I directly discuss this when I create the objects, it's going to be very difficult or challenging to understand all those things. So we start with the theoretical concepts, and when you start creating the attributes and facts at that point of time, you can really relate the things that we discussed in the modeling concepts.
Okay. So how
Hmm.
is this like important to a developer? I mean, is he going to be in the modeling sessions because it's more of a high level, architect level guy who knows data warehousing very well, right?
Yes. So when I discuss the model, it's for the microstrategy architect guys. If you're working as a
Mm,
microstrategy developer, it's okay if you don't know that. But if you're designing the schema objects in microstrategy, you need to understand the model. You are not going to create the model. And that's what something I have already told when we discuss on the concepts, when we are going through the modeling concepts. You are not going to design the model, but you need to understand the model so that you can create the correct schema objects.
correct. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I just thought I'll make it sure.
Sure, sure. Perfect. Anything else, sir?
Mm, that's
Uh,
all.
Perfect. So let's just stop over here, and we're gonna meet tomorrow at same time, and we'll continue from there.
All right.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you so much. Yes. Bye bye.